So basically what I'm trying with Nice and Sunny is to tell people you can go out and like travel the world and find your precious answers and all that.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm trying to do. So I was wondering because The Road is basically the main song that got me on the road.
Okay, great, fantastic.
So I was thinking, because right in the beginning you think that since your childhood you were scared of being trapped.
Yeah.
I know that feeling so well, and I tried to find out why that is. Have you ever thought about...
Yeah, well, the thing about my childhood is that there is an argument to be made that I got thrown out of the house when I was 8, because I got shipped off to a boarding school when I was 8. Right. I didn't have any choice in that decision. And in fact, I have a vivid memory of being driven to this boarding school, and my memory is that it hadn't really been explained to me what was going on. I mean, I was also reasonably kind of head in the clouds as a kid, so it might have been and I wasn't listening. That's entirely possible. But we kind of got there and my parents then left, and I was like, okay,
that's it now.
What the fuck? And like also I joined that school in like the summertime. I didn't arrive with like all the other kids in the year. I was like this one kid on my own, and I'm still not entirely sure why. But yes, I was just completely. It was a school with 250 people in, but I was completely on my own. And my parents left, and I was like, where are they going and when are they coming back again, please? And I was really heartbroken and upset, and I cried myself to sleep for the first month that I was there, and then I was at boarding school for 10 years. And the thing is, after a while, it's you got to be careful in talking about this because I don't want to get into the bravado of it, but it certainly out of necessity I became extremely self-reliant at that age, because it was just like it seemed to me like there was no other option. So I was initially in the dormitory, and then I had my own room in a later school, but I'd have to pack up at the end of every term and all the rest of it, and everything was self-contained. And particularly once I discovered punk rock music and the punk rock scene in London, when I was at secondary school, I started not going home in the bits where you're supposed to go home, because you'd have a term of 8 to 12 weeks or whatever, and then you'd have holidays between 4 and 8 weeks, and I just wouldn't go home anymore because I could go to London and crash on people's floors, and go to punk shows. There aren't really any punk shows in rural Hampshire, so I kind of and then so just from a very early age, I just sort of wasn't really pinned down to one place, and the house where I was raised stopped feeling like home around that time, and I haven't really felt at home anywhere particularly until the last 2 years when I got a place with my now wife, and that's been an interesting change for me. I'm still on tour, so it's all good, but I think that's at the root of a lot of this, is just that I felt like any kind of moorings that I had as a kid were cut away at a very young age, and there's no point in counterfactualism and me trying to figure out what would have happened if that didn't. Oh, sorry, that moved. Sorry, my bad. My bad, kicking the table. I'm a bad interviewee.
You're amazing. You're answering the whole interview already.
Oh no, shit. I'll slow down.
No, it's great. Okay, sorry. This is not the most professional.
Oh, it's all good. It's my fault for kicking the table. There we go. Like I say, I think counterfactualism is kind of a waste of time. I don't know what my life would have been like if that hadn't happened. I'm not sure that there was much of a universe where it wouldn't have happened, given that was what my dad was very keen on for his son, and specifically his son and not his daughters, I might add. But it was very formative for me, that experience. And when I then read Get in the Van by Henry Rollins as a kid, and because I was aware that bands went on tour, I'm not an idiot, but that was the first time I kind of became aware of the existence of DIY touring, and the fact that you didn't have to have a record deal and be a stadium level band before you could go on tour. You could quite literally get in the van and go. And I did my first tour in the summer of '98 with a bunch of friends. We booked it ourselves because
was that in the UK?
In the UK, and it was kind of, from most angles, it was a disaster. We lost money and no one came to any of the shows, and we all got the flu. But I had the best time of my life, and I sort of felt like I'd found a way of existing that made sense for me. And even it's a ridiculous thing for me to say now, isn't it? I was 16 then, but it was the first time I'd ever been to Leeds, which is a major city, but I'd never been to Leeds before, and I got there and I was like, wow, okay, this is Leeds. And that was true of loads of places on the tour. It was the first time I'd ever been there.
When did you go abroad for the first time?
That's a good question. The first show I played abroad must have been with Million Dead when we went to Belgium, because we did a bunch of shows in Belgium with Million Dead.
So how was that? And different languages as well? Did you have any?
Yeah, I mean, I'd been to Europe before, I'd sort of done like a French exchange when I was at school or whatever. That's a good, you know what, I've never really thought about this before. It doesn't stick out in my mind as being like a wow kind of moment the first time. I do remember we went to Latvia with Million Dead in 2004 or 5 it must have been, and that was pretty cool. It was really funny actually. We got an email from a guy who'd been really into my previous band, and he was like, I want to book you guys to Latvia, and I was like, cool, we broke up 4 years ago and no one ever cared. That was so, and I was like, but we've got a new band that's got some of the same people in it, so they booked us in Latvia, and that's a trip I remember really well, because I mean, playing in Belgium is one thing. Latvia felt much more kind of exotic. And then in the solo years, it took a little while to get up and running. I went to Latvia again, actually, very early doors, solo, and Lithuania and Russia, and places like that. But then, I started touring like Germany and stuff in 2009, I think it was. And I've always just loved the opportunity to see parts of the world simply because I play the guitar. That still seems faintly ridiculous to me, but I'm very grateful for it.
That's awesome. And you are counting your shows, right? I mean, it's not 100%, but it's close to it, that it's the correct number.
For solo shows, it's the correct number. It's definitely the only gap in my show counting is that first touring band I was in, Knee Jerk. We didn't count in that band. When I was in Million Dead, our drummer Ben started counting shows, and I thought he was out of his mind at the time. But then when the band broke up, I was really immediately that day I was grateful that he'd done that, because I had a list of everything that we'd done, and even at the time I remember thinking, I probably wouldn't remember the first half of this. And now, I mean, we're talking about shows that were 20 years ago. There's no way I'd remember any of that.
So I counted flights for a while, and then I just gave up with something.
Well, I mean, I can't keep it in my head, so it's written down. The other reason I started counting solo shows particularly was that for the first 2 years of solo touring, I was touring on my own. I had a rucksack and a guitar, and originally my fee for shows was 50 quid, and then it became 50 quid plus my train fare because my student rail card ran out. I was losing money touring even at that level, which was ridiculous. And there was no one else around. There was no one I could be like, hey, do you remember that time when? Do you know what I mean? So I thought if I kept a list, then I'd have something to look back on.
So tonight is 2,456.
Yes.
Pretty incredible.
Well, I mean, it's a funny thing, like that. I oscillate on this. On some levels, it doesn't matter. Do you know what I mean? Who gives a shit? There's loads of bands who've played a lot of shows, and quantity does not equal quality, and all of this kind of shit. But at the same time, I mean, like, I can sit back and I can tell you where I was on this day pretty much every year for the last 15 years without blinking.
And it's just nice to have a statistic in a way.
It's kind of cool. It's kind of fun. Apparently, somebody told me, in terms of bands for whom there are counts, I've only got Bon Jovi to beat now. But the thing about that, though, is that it doesn't really make any sense, because if you actually get into the bluesmen, they're the people no one's ever going to beat. Someone like B.B. King played 3 shows a day, 364 days a year for 50 years. I mean, whatever. And it's also, the other funny thing about the list is every now and again somebody asks me, like, what number do you think you'll get to? Which I think people don't realise is actually a really, like, hard question, because it's implicitly asking me either when do you think you're going to die, or when do you think you're going to become unpopular, or some combination of the two, or tired. And it's like, I don't really want to get into those questions.
But the question I had, did you ever count the countries?
Yeah, there's a country list on there as well. I'm on about 49 countries now, which is cool. I mean, it's funny though, like, I don't know if you've seen these things, you can get those maps where you can like scratch off with a coin where you've been. And that's a pretty humbling experience, simply because it shows you how limited actually my travels have been. I mean,
where's the biggest gap? Like Africa?
But this is the thing. I mean, so for example, I've played in Moscow and St. Petersburg, but I don't feel like I can cross off the whole of Russia.
Exactly.
That seems, plus also crossing off seems a bit naff. But like,
conquer.
There's, this is in all of my travels. Travel expands the mind, they say, and that's cool and that's true. But I do feel it's important for me to always keep in mind that I see the world through a very narrow prism while I'm traveling, which is I see the people I meet are all people who want to come to punk shows. Do you know what I mean? So, for example, I love the Deep South of the USA, but I'm also aware that I see the Deep South of the USA through the prism of punk rock, and that I'm a white man, and that, you know, other people have very, very different experiences in that part of the world. So, you know, you've got to be a little careful about, you know, I've seen the world. It's like I've seen some bits of the world, and I've seen a lot of dressing rooms and car parks and hotels. You did put
some effort in, because I know a lot of musicians have that issue that you travel so much you don't even know what country you're in anymore. You made an effort for a while on like Instagram to actually talk a bit about the history of a place.
Yeah, I kind of stopped doing that simply because I just sort of like, I was starting to repeat myself a bit, and it was really fun. I mean, I still try and check out where we are and learn something about where we are. You know, I've just stopped kind of putting it on Instagram for the time.
I like that. It was a good idea to just say, okay.
Yeah, it was cool. I mean, one of the things I was thinking about starting to do was, instead of doing the geography, was doing history facts on this day. That was kind of fun for an idea, and maybe I'll do that tomorrow.
Yes, I inspired.
Yeah. But, you know, it is really cool. I mean, but particularly a tour like this one, which is essentially an arena tour, like I have... Our tour bus is parked over there somewhere, and I walked from the bus to catering, and then I walked to a dressing room and started working, and I came in here to do this interview, and I'm going to go to the stage, and I'm going to go back to my bus.
And you haven't seen anything.
And that's my day. And I don't really have time to do more than that. Like, the thing I'm constantly reminding my mother is that I'm working. I'm not actually on holiday right now. Do you know what I mean? My mom still to this day occasionally sends me like, oh, you're going to this town. Well, here's the list of cool stuff within a 50-mile radius. And I'm like, how the fuck am I going to get 50 miles away from the gig? Even just time-wise, I don't have a car and so on and so forth. So, I mean, it's interesting, like Ben, who plays guitar in the Sleeping Souls, we call him our resident tourist because he does actually tend to get up early and like get to know the transit system, and he'll go and see stuff and take photos and stuff. But I mean, with no disrespect to Ben, I have more work to do because it's my name on the masthead and I have to do interviews and stuff like that. Not that I'm complaining, but you know, so I do try and make an effort to see stuff. But like, I went to DC like 5 times before I saw the White House, you know, because I just didn't have time.
That's crazy. By the way, I had one moment, I play poker quite a bit. That's why I was in the Isle of Man, like for Poker Stars and all that. And I was in Vegas playing poker, and somebody said, oh, you're from Europe, you know Frank Turner. And I was just like, what? so it's like something happened in a couple past years. So the US is like really something where you started like breaking through.
I think certainly in terms of my childhood perception of the world versus reality, as I've discovered it, the place that I feel like I've learned the most about is America. Yeah. America is the world, well, the UK and Europe is full of what I call like armchair anti-Americans or armchair American experts who've never been there, or they went to New York for a weekend and it's like, fuck you, dude, that's not America. And we are unique or unusual, let's say, as a British touring band because we have played outside of New York, Chicago, LA, Austin. Do you know what I mean? Like, we've played fucking everywhere in the States, like a lot. Do you know what I mean? I've played in Montana many times, and I can tell you quite a lot about Iowa and all the rest of it. And that's been a really wonderful experience for me because my preconceptions about America were completely upended the first time I went there, and then they continue to be upended every single time I go there. So I'm a massive like Americophile. It's a hugely fascinating place to me.
It is.
Yeah.
And would you consider England now your home base, especially now after having been married now and like building a base there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it always was that. A couple of things. I mean, first of all, I wrote the album England Keep My Bones, which is sort of about, I mean, it's not a concept record, but there's a lot of songs that kind of think about England in that album. And the reason for that is that I found myself, because after the period of time where I started touring with a band in the UK and then Europe, I was still touring America solo because of financial reasons. And, you know, night after night after night, I'd be standing on a stage in a crowded room and I'd be the only English person in there. And that just gives you an opportunity to think about it. And I don't think there's any moral content ascribed to national identity. Obviously, it's ridiculous that I need to say that out loud, but apparently I do for some people. But it was just interesting to me to think about that. And there's a weird thing in England where there's a lot of people who want to say that there's no such thing as English culture or English history, which is actually a ridiculous statement. I don't think English culture and English history is uniformly good by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, I don't really think that saying it's good or bad is a meaningful thing to do anyway, but it definitely exists, you know, and I was interested in that and how that influences me as a person. And the other thing thing is that because of all of the touring I've done, I've actually seen more of England and indeed the UK as a whole than almost everybody I know, apart from other touring people.
You saw the Isle of Man.
Right, but I mean, like, you know, I have my mum. My mum said the craziest thing to me the other day. I mean, my mum's from the south of England, I get it, but my mum is, how old is my mum? 70 odd. And she went to Manchester for the first time the other day, and I was like, what the fuck? But that's, you know, I've been to Huddersfield, and I know Hartlepool town centre reasonably well, and like I can tell you about like Barnstaple, and do you know what I mean? It's like, and I'm grateful for that. It's a really cool thing.
So
and
it does feel good to have like a place you know as your home base.
Yeah.
You could, in theory, be anywhere, right?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I mean, the other thing that anybody who knows me, particularly my wife, will tell you is that I am the most there is a part of my personality that's the most ingrained Londoner you'll ever meet. And it's a funny thing because I wasn't actually raised in London, but my dad's family are from North London, and I now live in the area of London where my dad's family are from. And then when I was a kid, every weekend we go up there. And if there's one place in the world that I have an absolutely raging passion for, it's London. And London history is my absolute thing. And like I collect the London walking guides. And whenever I have any spare time, I just go and look at old shit in London. And
how much time in the year do you spend at home?
More now, because I have a home. Part of the reason why I toured so much in my 20s and early 30s is because I didn't have anywhere to go back to. I was, in an incredibly bourgeois sense of the word, kind of technically homeless. My mum had a spare bed in her office down in Winchester, and there were bars in London where I knew the people who lived there and I could crash there. I didn't have my own spot for about 9 years. And so I would, this is a slightly trite statement, but I would quite often want to be on tour because I was kind of using up people's patience and generosity back home. Do you know what I mean? It's like, book some more shows. But, you know, and I didn't, you know, I wasn't settled in a relationship or anything like this for a long time. And so, you know, it just didn't really make any odds to me whether I was in London or whether I was on tour or indeed in Winchester or anywhere else. And it's only been in the last 5 years or so that I actually have my own place, and I have a wife and I have a cat and all this kind of shit. You know, that's not necessarily the right order to have said that. But you know, and now I have to go home, and we have slowed down a bit on the touring schedule.
Yeah.
You know,
so your wife is a musician as well, right?
Yes, she is. Yeah.
A touring musician as well.
We're doing a tour together
nice.
Next month, which will be her first tour.
That's amazing.
So it's really cool. I didn't really kind of realise. She kind of didn't really talk about music that much when we were getting together because I think she didn't want to come across as somebody who was interested in me because it would help her career or whatever. So it took me a while to tune into how talented she was and all the rest of it. But now, here we are. And the EP, the single came out yesterday and it's awesome. And we're doing the tour in March, which is super cool. But you know, we tour less. I don't think we'll do another year there where we top 200 shows anytime soon. And that's a lot. And those years were hard. I mean, I enjoyed them, and nobody made me do them, so I'm not complaining. But you know, we do more 100 to 150 these days. It's still a fair amount of time away from home, but it's funny. People still. I mean, people occasionally kind of go, "Oh, hardest working musician" or whatever, and I'm just like, "Oh, really?" It just seems like an odd compliment. I mean, I guess it's meant as a compliment, I'll take it, but it's again, quantity doesn't equal quality, and there's a lot of people who work hard in this industry who don't get a round of applause, and there's a lot of people who work in other jobs and work really hard and don't get awards for it, you know, so fucking whatever. But anyway, yeah, so we don't talk quite as much as we used to.
Cool. I have 2 more questions and then I'll let you go.
Sure.
Is there one country in the world that you feel like you have to either play or perform or just visit that you really need to see?
I like to think I'm pretty omnivorous with that kind of thing, you know, and I'd love to go everywhere at some point. I mean, there's a large chunk of the world that's not interested in a white dude with an acoustic guitar and a beard and tattoos, and that's fine. And I probably won't play there, but the big one for me this year is that I am finally, praise be, going to South America, a place I've been trying to get to for fucking ever.
They can go really crazy there.
Yeah, they can. It's quite Wild West, the touring circuit there still, so we've been trying to book a tour there for fucking years. And we finally found the right promoter and got the right shows in, so that's happening, which I'm really excited about. But yeah, I mean, I'd like to go everywhere, really. I mean, I've never been to Japan, which is a shame to me, and I'd love to go to Japan to tour. But I mean, as an individual, I mean, I'd love to go everywhere, really.
Nice. Okay, last question. So basically, what I am now is like digital nomad. It's like a term a lot of people don't really like. And musicians aren't necessarily digital nomads, although they are nomads in a way, or like vagabonds or something. But the digital part plays more and more of a role, like using social media and so on. We already like quickly talked about like your Instagram. How important is social media for you?
Well, I have very mixed feelings about social media. Social media is a necessary tool for my business, is the first thing to say. You know, just in terms of communicating with the people who are interested in my music about everything from show times on a given day to ticket links to the fact I have a new album to or indeed often you try and use it as a signal boost for other people's stuff, like, you know, somebody, if I've got friends who are in a band and I think it's cool, I'm like, hey, everybody check this out. I think that there is an argument to be made that social media is a complete fucking cesspit that's ruining our society, and I definitely in the last 2 years have worked very hard to come off it on a personal level. I don't ever read Twitter replies or comments or any of that shit. My email's public domain. If you want to talk to me, you can talk to me.
That's how I got in touch with you.
Right, I don't want to have a public domain conversation with people. The reason for that is that the central thing you need to understand about Twitter, there was a friend of mine explained this to me, and it was like scales falling from my eyes. The currency of Twitter and social media more broadly is not knowledge, it's attention. And once you understand that, the whole thing becomes clear for the shit fit that it is. And essentially the politics of Twitter are the politics of the high school cafeteria, who gets to sit on the cool kids table. And I didn't give a fuck about that when I was at school, and I certainly don't give a fuck about it when I'm 38.
Almost like for a musician, the currency is attention as well. It's like,
sure.
But you can use social media to channel it towards. You can also distract.
Absolutely, and I mean, and you know, there are cool things. I mean, in the past, I've done kind of like guerrilla shows that we just use social media for. The most recent one that I can remember off the top of my head, which was super cool, is I played a show in Montreal, opening for Arkells, and we had a day off the next day, and we played pretty early. And I ended up hanging out backstage with this dude called Jared. And he was like, I live around the corner, and we put together a house show at his house that night. What I didn't realise until later was that apparently he's like a mega soap star in Canada. And like, so I put it on Twitter and was like, send me an email to this address and I'll tell you the address. I'm not going to put his address on Twitter, but like, and people got in touch, and it was hilarious because all the Canadians who came for the house show sort of walked in and just went, fuck me, it's Jared, whatever his name is, I don't know. He's a lovely guy, absolute sweetheart. But like, that was a very strange evening, but it was cool as fuck. And that was entirely enabled by social media. There's no way you could have done that.
So would that be like a advice for other musicians maybe to...
I would just say, just don't read the comments. Do you know what I mean? There's a wonderful... well, I mean, there's a caveat to that. Don't read the comments. The problem, again, trying to read every Twitter reply is like trying to listen into every single conversation about you that's happening in a pub all over the world. It's just not, it's not possible, and it's not healthy mentally to even try and imagine doing that. Like, fuck that. Particularly once you get to a certain level of success, you know, why would you bother? Do you know what I mean? I mean, the one thing I would say is there are people, someone like Jason Isbell, who is a friend of mine, and he has the kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for? He has a kind of the balance and the centering as an individual to be really fucking funny on Twitter, like taking down the haters and all the rest of it. And he actually makes good currency out of that. And there are musicians and actors and all the rest of it who, like James Blunt, for example, is the funniest motherfucker ever on Twitter. I don't personally have the skill to do that. I just get upset, essentially. And, you know, there have been many occasions in the last couple of years when I find myself at the centre of a hate storm on social media where I don't sleep for 3 days and I can't eat and I get really, really fucked up, and it's I don't want to be like that. That's a horrible thing. And I will live a long and fucking happy life without dealing with that. Thank you very much. So it's a but I mean, at the end of the day, it's a tool. Do you know what I mean? And it can be used for good and it can be used for bad.
It's a business tool.
And I mean, unfortunately for the time being, it seems to be majority used for shittiness. Like, there is so much awfulness on social media out there right now, and there's occasions where I look at my phone and think I could find 25 people calling me a cunt in 30 seconds if I wanted to right now, and that's not a good feeling, and therefore I try and push my phone away because I don't need that.
So for other musicians, use it as a business tool.
Use it as a business tool. Yeah, don't get wrapped up in it. The thing that's great is that thus far, touch wood, no one has invented a way of downloading the experience of being in a room with other humans. And actually, that's the most important part of what I do, is the communitarian sense that at a show you gather a room full of strangers and you show them that they have more in common than they do that separates them. And that's the power of live music, and it's the power of art, and it's the power of community. And that's the thing I'm interested in, and it's really cool, and that's got fuck all to do with social media other than it being a way of getting people into that room in the first place. But nothing else really matters. Fuck the rest of it.
That's a perfect way to end the conversation. And also, it's a sold-out show.
Yes.
That's incredible.
Yeah, that's exciting.
So I'm going to be there tonight with my mom.
Awesome.
Somewhere in the crowd.
Excellent. I'll see you crowd surfing over the front now.
Not this time.
Just your mum then.
Yeah, I'll send her over there. Thank you so much, and it's been
My
an
pleasure.
honor, and I'm looking forward to see you tonight on the stage.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was a fun chat. I really enjoyed that.
Awesome.
Good.